Hi everyone, I wanted to make this short video explaining how you should be reading through some of these scholarly journal articles that you'll have assigned in this class. I'm sure a lot of you have done this before, or at least have used scholarly journal articles to write a research paper or something, but I want you to understand how to use these articles the most efficiently you can. So I want to teach you what art or which sections of the article you should be focusing on. So you're not reading word for word every little thing these articles say, because that can be time consuming. And a lot of the times it's not worth it and not really useful to you in any way. So without further ado, we'll get started with this particular article. So I just chose a random article that I've used for research before. It is in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships. That's not something I'm going to focus on a lot today, but just so you know, there are obviously better quality journals than others. So this particular journal happens to be pretty well respected. It's, people like it. It's a good one, good articles, good data, good studies are in this journal. So we have that. This article focuses on relational uncertainty and interdependence in marriage. So it's looking specifically at the relational turbulence theory. That's good to know because we like to know what kind of framework they're coming from. So it's good to know what theory they'll be using. And if you come across an article that's not using a theory, that's fine, but really quality work always focuses on some sort of theory. Just keep that in mind. All right, so we're scrolling down. You can ignore a lot of my highlighting. I am an over highlighter, so I do not recommend you doing exactly what I did here, but that's just how I read sometimes. So the first thing that you will want to pay attention to is the abstract, right? The abstract will tell you exactly what happens in this article. It's a summary of the whole article. So this will help you, but it won't get you through the whole article. It won't help you understand, and it won't give you everything you need. So this abstract is actually a little bit long, but it goes through what the study is looking at, how it did it, who they focused on, who they asked, and their results. And then obviously, or not obviously, but there's also usually some sort of statement here that's like, this is what we could do in the future, or this is what future research could look at. So definitely focus on the abstract. That'll give you a good idea of what you're reading for. So abstract, and then what I do personally is I scroll through all of this. Notice there's not a lot of highlighting there. So intro, I never read the intro because most of the time it's just fluff and I don't care. It's nice because sometimes it'll tell you what theory they're using. Like here, we know that they're going to abbreviate relational turbulence theory as RTT. So throughout the article, when you see RTT, that's what it's talking about. But other than that, it doesn't tell me a lot that I need to know. What the introductions, what you do want to look out for in introductions is how they explain the theory, especially if you're not familiar with the theory. So if you've never heard of relational turbulence theory, then you might want to read this section, because this section is what's going to tell you what the theory is and how they're applying it. So read about the theory, especially when you don't know about it. And the introduction also will define variables. So you'll know how they're talking about what relational uncertainty is, what interdependence is, how they're defining those terms. But once you've found how they are defining certain things and how they're talking about the theory, a lot of this information isn't necessary. It builds up to the hypotheses. So it builds up to their arguments. So if you want to see how they get there, then you can do that, but just look for the hypotheses and look for their explanations of their variables and their theory. Here, the theory or the hypothesis is usually pretty clear. It's usually stated like this, kind of on its own. I know this particular study, I think, had a lot of hypotheses. So yeah, you sometimes see all the hypotheses down at the bottom right before a method section, but other times, and it's best practice to kind of include the hypotheses when you're talking about them. So kind of like this article did. All right, so we're scrolling, see, I didn't do a lot of highlighting. And then we get to methods. You can mostly skip over methods. You can come back to it if you want, but as far as reading and understanding the outcomes of the article, a lot of the times that's not going to be helpful. And you can also skip over the results most of the time. The results, for me, because I know what stats look like and what some of these stats mean, it's helpful for me, but if you haven't taken a stats class, it's not going to be helpful for you. So you can just scroll past most of the results section. Now what they've done here, I think, let me check. Okay, just kidding. So they've kind of done this a little bit differently than some other articles, but what they've done is they've started talking about whether or not their hypotheses were confirmed or not in the results section. So it might help to skim through this one, but even if you don't read any of this, you'll get most of the information you need by just reading the discussion. So the discussion usually, or typically if it's done right, should explain the results in more layman's terms. So it should be a little bit easier to digest. You don't have to skip around numbers a lot. You just have to read what they found. The only problem with only reading the discussion is sometimes it's a little bit biased to what they want you to take away. But I don't want you all worrying about that in this class. So discussion, implications, see, we tested the hypotheses linking blah, 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 and revealed significant positive association. So you get all of that good information. Here they are explaining all of the results, everything they found, so you don't have to read that results section. And then limitations and future directions. Sometimes this is fun to read, especially the future directions, to give you some ideas of if you wanted to do your own study or if you wanted to do a research project, what can you do? What can you contribute? So to review everything I just said, I want you, when you're reading through articles, to focus first on the abstract and the discussion. And then if you're curious, like you're like, well, who participated in this study? Like who did they test, or what did they do to come up with these answers? Then go back up to the methods section. The methods section will tell you who participated. In this particular study, it looked like they're aged 20 to 85 and the median age was 50. So not your typical college sample. It's a good sample here. It looks like it was a survey, an online research survey. And it tells you how they developed those scale items and the questions that they asked others. Results, again, mostly statistics. So you're focusing on the abstract and the discussion. You can get more information when you look at the intro. So look at the beginning of the article for definitions, pretty much, or explanations of the theory. And then when you're looking at all of this, keep in mind that this is a quantitative study. Sometimes qualitative studies are a little bit different, and I just want to show you that real quick. Let me see if I am, yeah. So by looking at this article, this is a qualitative study, meaning that they did more interviews, short answer type of things. So the results aren't as stats heavy. The results aren't numbers in the same way a quantitative study would be. So here what we see is the results are listed in themes. So when you run across a qualitative study, which is typically interviews or where they've answered a lot of short answer questions, read through the results section, because that's where you're getting all of the good information, what people said during their interviews, stuff like that, and what themes the researchers picked apart here. As you can see in this article, I did some like annotating. I did like, what are my questions about this? Or do I agree with what they're saying, or kind of how they picked this apart? So this is qualitative. The first one was quantitative. Either way, you're focusing first on the abstract, then the discussion, going to the intro to clarify any words or terms that you don't really understand, methods if you want to know who participated and how they did it, and results if you want to get a little bit more stats heavy. So that's the way I want you reading through these. I'll also provide you all a template to kind of write down your thoughts and make sure you're understanding articles when you read through them. But the major takeaway here should be that you shouldn't be reading word for word every single thing in the article, but you should give yourself enough time to kind of go back and look through things that you might not understand. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, happy reading.